Welcome into episode 32 of the Godly Young Men podcast. Today we have a very interesting episode, an episode we've been kind of excited to film for a while. We're talking Andrew Tate. If you're watching this and you do not know who Andrew Tate is, I would be shocked. I would be very surprised. What was he, the most Googled man in the world in June or something like that?
Let me know the rock you've been hiding under if that's the case.
Yeah, exactly. I think I did talk to somebody the other day who had never heard of him, which was surprising.
Wow.
But so Andrew Tate, Joe, you actually might know a little bit more about kind of his backstory than I do. I just know right now he is a very well-known, I don't even know if you can call him an influencer, but he's one of these guys. He's a masculinity guru is what a lot of people refer to him as. He is all over YouTube. He's all over, I'm not on TikTok, but from what I know, he's all over TikTok. He's this guy who talks about being a guy. And a lot of people are going to him in their quest to find masculinity, I guess. And so we felt, as the Godly Young Men podcast, it's probably about time we do an episode on his take on masculinity, which gets a lot of bad press from certain people and gets a lot of good press from certain people. And so where do we fall? That's what we're going to discuss with this episode. Where do we fall on Andrew Tate? We're going to talk about his 10 rules for life. He's got a video. It's actually his pinned tweet on Twitter that are his 10 rules for life. I'm not going to necessarily encourage you to go watch it just because he does cuss quite a bit in the video. But this is what we're going to use as the basis because, again, a lot of men are going to Andrew Tate to figure out how to be masculine, to figure out how to be a guy. And so we feel like we need to address that.
Honestly, it was a good synopsis. The video we're going to cover, the 10 rules of life is what it is.
Yep.
I thought I did a really good job of showing a lot of his stuff. I've watched a lot of Andrew Tate. I shouldn't say a lot. I mean, there's hours and hours worth of interviews and podcasts and everything that he's done. But he is fascinating, polarizing. He's every adjective you could think of pretty much. The guy's kind of a jerk, but he's intriguing. There's a lot of things like that. And so from his background, obviously he
was a kickboxing
champion in Britain. Then he started running. I think he would date these girls or sleep with these girls and then get them to basically go into business with him from a sex point of view, and made a ton of money that way. And so he's
his
not
net worth is like $350 million.
Yeah,
now,
he is not an upstanding individual from a moral perspective. But then he recently converted to Islam, and I guess he is trying to do some things more moral. But then he was arrested in Romania. Again, he's just so polarized.
There's of stuff.
So much about this guy.
The left hates him.
The left hates him, but some people on the right hate him.
Yeah,
So he recently did an interview on Tucker Carlson, and there's a lot of people on the right coming out like disavowing everything. And this guy's
interviewed
horrible.
with Candace Owens. And,
that's right.
Yeah, like a lot of prominent Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens are pretty prominent people on the right, and they got blasted for interviewing the guy.
For even having on. So yes, he's all into masculinity, and we think he gets some things right. We're going to come right off the bat. Yeah. We're going to look at the good and the bad because we know you've heard of him.
I would assume you'd heard of him.
We're assuming, yes. If you're a godly young man, if you're a young man and you're on any social media, my guess is you've seen him.
Yeah.
Specifically TikTok. I think he owns TikTok. He's everywhere on that. But we want to look at some of the good ideas that he has. We want to look at some of the negatives as well. But we want to start right off the bat. Your parents may be listening to this going, how dare they? Like, we should disavow everything. There's a reason he's a big deal.
Yeah.
There's a reason why... I don't know why everybody turns to him, and it's because he's saying things that we all kind of either know to be true, or we want it to be true, or we want that internally for us, and he's saying it, and so it's like, wow, that's really, really good, and I want that.
I think it's irresponsible and it's kind of foolish to think that you either have to accept everything from somebody or nothing from somebody. Right. That's a very, I guess, kind of immature way to look at the world. I mean, obviously, like we've talked about with books before. Like there are books, spiritual books that are maybe written by a Calvinist that it's like, yeah, I don't agree with everything, but that book has got some really good points. For us to just say, nope, that book is worthless, or C.S. Lewis isn't a Christian, wasn't a New Testament Christian, so we shouldn't read his books. To me, that's kind of foolish. So Andrew Tate, along those same lines, we're going to go through these 10 rules, his 10 rules for life. 8 of them, 9 of them are like, yeah, I don't really find much to disagree with in them, which is interesting. What we're going to get to at the end is that his basis or his foundation, his backing premise for all of these is just way off. It's totally off. And that's what we want to hit at the end. But we're gonna go through these 10 rules and then talk about why they're off in the end, at the end of the episode here. So let's just go through them. Let's start with number 10. He talks about embrace suffering. His whole idea is, as a guy, you can do anything you want. You can basically build your own character in life like a video game because you're a guy. Yep. Because if you work hard enough, if you're willing to be uncomfortable, if you embrace suffering enough, look, you can be anything you want to be, essentially. 1 for 1 so far. Like, I agree with that.
I do.
Yeah.
I agree with it as well. I think we use a lot of excuses as to why it didn't work out for us. He has cocooned himself a little bit, because if a guy really does work hard and it doesn't work out and he kind of gets, he gets cheated or whatever it may be, like,
bad luck.
That does happen from time to time. And he can just say, well, I guess you weren't working hard enough. At the same time, how many times has that happened versus the time where the guy's like, well, I did my best, but was it really your best? I mean, were you really putting full effort into it? And the idea of embracing suffering, life is suffering.
Yeah.
Life, you will suffer in life. That is a given. The question is, what will you do with that suffering? Will you let that suffering define you, or will you use that suffering as motivation to do something better?
Well, and the key word is embrace suffering. How many young men are going through life trying to live life with as little suffering as possible?
Right.
Like, they're seeking comfort. They're wanting to embrace comfort and
Exactly.
luxury rather than suffering. And his whole point, once again, is like, look, if you want to be anything you want to be, if you want to be able to, and of course, this is where the flawed premise comes in, the girls, the money, all the things, the high-powered career, he says you just got to be ready to suffer and be willing to suffer. And again, I think that premise is correct. Like, we got a lot of young guys who they would rather do anything but. They'd rather just be comfortable.
If you're seeking like the path of least resistance, you're basically going nowhere. Like, I hate to say it, you're going nowhere in life. If you look at the college degree you chose, and it's what everybody else is doing because it's safe, and there's a lot of jobs in this area, and you'll make your $60,000, $70,000 a year, and, okay, it's safe. Nobody achieves greatness, in my opinion, by playing it safe.
Sure.
You have to take risks, and when you take risks, you will suffer. So embrace the idea of suffering.
Yeah, let's get into number 9, because there's 10 of these. We're gonna have to roll through them pretty quick. So he just calls it stupid, arrogant, and lazy. And his whole point is the only reason people aren't rich is because they're either stupid, arrogant, or lazy. And I'll go through those real quick, and then Joe, I'll let you comment, and then we can move on. Because this one is one that I think I don't necessarily agree with, simply because I don't think being rich should be the primary goal for young men. Like, we're not going to be on the Gala Young Men podcast telling you guys, your number one goal should be to become rich. That's pretty much what Andrew Tate thinks, is that you should work hard to become rich and basically show off your wealth to everybody. We don't subscribe to that.
Power and influence,
Right. We don't subscribe to that. We don't believe in that. But it is an interesting point that he says, look, people aren't rich and they're not wealthy because they're either too dumb to figure out how to generate wealth. And he talks about how that's actually a pretty small percentage. Like, most people, there's a lot of dumb people with money. But then he talks about a lot of people are arrogant. Like, they think they know it all. And you see this a lot of times with young guys. Like, they think they can YouTube it, or they think, like, well, I know enough about a subject. And he's like, most people, if they would just humble themselves and not be arrogant and think they know everything, they would get wealthy. They would find ways to be wealthy. And then the lazy one, obviously, we kind of already talked about. They just don't want to work hard. And so this one, again, I don't necessarily disagree with his point. I just think godly young men striving above all else to be rich is not great.
Right. Again, I think he looks at richness. He looks at having wealth as power, having wealth as, like, you have status. And that's the point in life, is to be somebody who is
specifically for a man.
Right. And to have status. I don't know that I disagree with the idea that it's good to have status. It's good to be somebody that men look to and say, man, that's a great man. Like, everybody wants to be that. That's the competitive aspect here. And we're going to get into more of that in another coming up in the rules of life. There's not much that I have to add. I think you're absolutely right, though, in the fact that, man, if you make money the end goal, you're going to be pretty disappointed. We're also going to come to that a little more toward the end.
Well, and we're going to do an episode here in a few weeks about wealth and about how should godly young men view wealth, and then also taking financial responsibility.
But I don't think he's wrong in the fact that it is easier to make money today than it ever has been in the history of the world. There are so many side hustles. There are so many ways. And some people may say, well, that's with the job economy and everything. Look, if you wanted to go DoorDash, you can make money. If you want to go mow lawns, you can make money. If you want to type up certain things online, if you want to take 1-hour surveys online, there are ways to make money.
Yeah.
And there are ways to hustle and grind. And to me, I think he's right.
He's saying, lazy. Don't be too stupid, don't be too arrogant, don't be too lazy.
That may be mean.
Yeah.
I think it's fairly accurate.
Right.
Number 8, speed is the key. He says speed is the key. And he tells a story about a guy that he knows that's making music, and album's almost out, man. Album's almost out. It's really good. We're working on some good music. So cool, man. Good for you. 6 months later, boy, that album's getting close. Dude, it's 6 months. Well, mixing takes a long time. And so it was an interesting story. And so just to prove the point, he takes 2 hours, writes a song. He's not a musician, but writes a song,
puts it out,
makes it 3 hours for the music video, 5 hours total, puts it out. And because he's Andrew Tate, got millions of views.
Yeah.
But the point is, hey, sometimes like waiting for everything to be perfect, sometimes you just need to be speedy about it. Sometimes you need to just get out there, take the initiative, and not overthink everything to death. At least that's what I got from it.
Yeah, and I agree. Urgency would be the word. I don't think he ever used that word, but that's what I think.
Yeah, it's
like,
a great
there's an
word.
urgency to it where you're not just sitting around, like you said, waiting for everything to kind of fall into place or just waiting for things to just kind of go your way or happen. No, just make it happen. Like, just get up and do it. And, you know, I don't necessarily have a lot of thoughts on this one about whether I'm sure that's probably right in most industries. Like, the faster you do things, the quicker you do things, and the more apt you are to jump and take initiative and do things is probably going to work out better for you. But again, like his premise that we'll get to at the end is just, it's all about riches. It's all about work, or not work. Yeah, it is all about work. It's all about like career and status and things. So that actually kind of leads us into number 7, which is his 7th rule was to be competitive. We're both competitive guys. Like he pretty well hits he pretty well hits this nail on the head, because he talks about how the fact that men have been competing since the beginning of time. They compete with their wealth, they compete with their status, they compete with their job, and again, we have to walk a very fine line here, because you don't want to walk into a room and immediately start comparing yourself to everybody and be like, am I wealthier than them? And am I better looking than them? Do I have a better job than them? That's not the way of Christ. That's not what Christ did at all. And so we can't be that way. At the same time, competition is important. Competition is important for a young man in their striving for greatness and striving to be a better guy. I don't think it is necessarily wrong to in order to be like, I want to work harder than that person. Yeah. I'd like to have a better job. I'd like to, fill in the blank. Like, competition is a part. God wired that into so many guys. I would say 99% of guys, he wired competition into us, and I think he did it for a reason.
Yeah, I think so too. I don't think it's a negative. It can be, as you referenced, it can be about insecurity of, do I measure up, and
it can be about pride,
and it can be about pride and arrogance, which in my opinion is the same as insecurity. I mean, it comes from the same place. But yes, and I think this is where he's at, is it's so prideful. There's so much arrogance to what he's saying of like, well, I know that I walk in the room and I'm the richest man there. So what?
Right.
But at the same time, that competitive streak is what causes men to conquer, is what causes men to build pyramids and build skyscrapers and to do bigger and better and everything else. And some people may look at that and go, well, that's materialism. That's all this bad stuff. That's capitalism. First off, I'm a big fan of capitalism. Second off, I think being competitive is what helps us get further in life. And there's, like you said, there's a reason God put it in us. It's part of taking dominion.
Yes.
Like, when he gives the dominion mandate in Genesis 1, the very first chapter of the Bible, the idea is go out and conquer. Go out and take dominion. Rule is the term he uses. Like, we're intended to rule our domain, which is to rule all of life. Like, man is the pinnacle. And so how do you rule all of life if you don't feel you measure up, or if you're not competitive and you're not trying to gain the advantage over other things? Not in a wrong way, but you want to be at the best. You want to be the best you can be. This is why you work unto the Lord. This is why you pursue greatness in every way, and that's coming from a competitive spirit to rule.
What's the whole idea? If you're competitive and you work hard in your field and your job and your position, you're probably going to work hard in your faith too. Yeah. Like, we got to be very careful about the works-based salvation thing. We don't earn our salvation. We get that, but at the same time, being a Christian requires work, like effort. It requires doing things. It requires actually striving to be more Christ-like. And if you don't have the discipline to do that in your job or in your sports, or we talked about this before, if you don't have discipline to do it in those areas, you're probably not going to do it in being a Christian either, in doing good works and in being more Christ-like. You're just going to say, participation trophy, I show up, I get it. Andrew Tate does not believe in that, clearly, and that's something, again, his premise might be wrong. I agree with this. Like, competition is important, I think, for guys.
This is one of those this is why he's important and why he is so big in today's age.
Yeah.
We're sick of the participation trophies. Everybody realizes that doesn't feel good. Nobody feels good about themselves. He comes along and says, you need to be competitive and you need to strive for what you want in life. And it's like, cool. It's because it hits what we are hardwired to as a guy.
And what the culture's lacking.
Correct. Yeah. He's saying things that no one else is willing to say. The sad thing, we can get to this, again, I know I'm jumping ahead, but truly, the sad thing to me is that we have to have in my opinion, hedonistic, though he claims he's not, but a hedonistic, secular Muslim guy, a follower of Islam, to tell us these things when a lot of these are Christian things that he's saying. A lot of this is what Christians should be pushing from the pulpit of get out there and work hard, be competitive, work to your advantage and to your family's advantage and be the best that you can be. Like, cool. Let's go to number 6. We'll keep moving. Number 6 is no drugs, no vape, which I gotta be honest, I was a little shocked to hear that.
Yeah.
That he's never tried cocaine, has never smoked weed, and his point is like, he was doing kickboxing, of course he had to do this drug testing, and so now he's 35, what's the point of starting any of this at 35? He does do tobacco, he does drink some alcohol, but I thought he was like, honestly, I thought he did a lot more than that. Yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't believe in anything that can take power over him. And I think that's like, in this video, he goes on for like a minute and a half spiel about why vaping is stupid. And we've had an episode about vaping before, and it's like, why would, and to agree with him, why would you, as a specifically godly young man, want to ingest that stuff? Why would you want to give power to something like that where it's probably going to addict you? It's probably going to it's probably going to make you do things you don't want to do.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with this one. No drugs, no vape. Like, we're not going to come up there and say, no, Andrew Tate, that's kind of a bad one. You know,
that's ridiculous.
You missed the mark there. And like, no, that one's correct.
Yeah, yet again, I think he's speaking common sense. And here's what's great about this. Because he is a G, as he calls himself, because he's cool, a lot of people...
What does that even mean? I don't even know what that means.
I don't know if it used to be gangster.
He says
OG,
he's the top G. Yeah.
Yeah, is a gangster. I hope he doesn't mean God. I don't know. But yeah,
he probably does mean that.
He probably does. But what I think is cool about this messaging is he does work hard, he does do all this stuff, but I really did think he was kind of more into the party scene, and he's not. And so I think it's good for young kids to see you can work hard and you can achieve greatly in life. Though again, I'm not backing everything he does, but you can achieve those things without having to go the drug route, without having to be an idiot, without having to engage in all the stupid things that the culture tells you to, like vaping. I think that's important. Give us a number 5.
Number 5, and we wholeheartedly subscribe to this one. He says, find a mentor.
Yeah.
I don't think we've done an episode on mentorship before. We'll add it to the list. We definitely need to do one. But his whole point is like, if you want to learn how to be really good at cooking or baking, who should you go find? Somebody who's really good at cooking or baking.
Right.
Like, duh. And of course, he then goes into, if you want to find out how to make money and make a lot of money, go sit at the feet of people who can make money or who know how to make money and do it really well. And we agree with that. Like, we as young men often think we know it all.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of a teenage trope, right? Oh, we know best and we know it all. We got the internet, we got YouTube, whatever. His whole point is find people who are already good at something and go learn from them. And I think that definitely applies to everything for you as a godly young man spiritually. If you want to be a really good dad, go sit at the, if unfortunately, if your dad is not somebody who you can look up to, find somebody who is a really good dad and say, what did you do? Teach me.
Yeah.
I want to know. If you want to be a really good preacher, go sit at the feet of somebody who's a really good preacher. If you want to be good at plumbing, go sit at the feet of somebody who's really good at plumbing. Like, all of these things, find people who are already good at those things and learn from them. It should be basic common sense, but so many young guys are not doing this.
It takes humility.
Yes.
First off, it takes humility and it takes self-awareness to know I'm not good at this and I need help.
Yeah.
And if you have those two things, which often go hand in hand, humility and self-awareness, I think this one is very easy because you will be willing to walk into the room and go, I truly don't know what I'm doing. Can you please help me?
Yeah.
But a lot of young kids want to pretend, this goes back to number 9, the stupid, arrogant, and lazy, they want to pretend they have it all together.
Yeah.
And that arrogance is what kills us. And so finding a mentor really is about recognizing you don't know it all, and somebody has done this ahead of you that's really good. Maybe I should go learn from them.
Why do the greatest athletes in the world still listen to their coaches? Why do they still have personal trainers? Why do they still have people that they go to ask questions about things? You think Patrick Mahomes really needs somebody who is better at quarterback than, like, he's the best quarterback in the world,
right?
And yet he still has a personal trainer. He still has got people. He's still got a coach that he respects and listens to. You see that the greatest athletes in the world, they're probably a little arrogant. They're confident, but they know they got to where they are, and if they want to go even further, they need to find somebody who can instill it in them, who can mentor them. They need others, exactly. And so we would definitely recommend that one. As far as if you don't have a mentor in any area, find one. We'll do an episode on that for sure.
Yeah, I think so.
Get in number 4, because this is something you've talked about quite a bit.
Yes, number 4, outwork everyone. Outwork everyone. Man, I don't know. I think that's fascinating. I think you and I were talking a little bit off air about this. That's not always feasible. Especially when you have other obligations, Christian obligations, family obligations, things like that. Overall, I think this is a really good premise because we have too many guys that look around and they just think like everyone else. But I'll tell you,
they want to do the bare minimum is how I put that. They just want to do the absolute. I got to work 40 hours. I work 40 hours. I'm done.
Right. So they kind of use the lowest common denominator. They look at the guy and be like, well, at least I'm better than him. Right. Instead of I could be great. They don't look at outworking everyone. They work at outworking the lowest man on the totem pole.
Yeah.
Well, that's not really what we're supposed to do as godly young men. We're supposed to strive for greatness, right, in everything that we're doing. So the idea of outworking everyone, I think, once again, I don't disagree with him on the premise of you should be the hardest working guy at your job. Now, there's the flip side of this, which I guess you can kind of
Well, yeah, because Tate in the video talks about how he works 18 hours a day, which is, he might be lying, but he does seem to be a pretty intense guy about how he wakes up, he gets on his phone and starts working, and then throughout the day, 18 hours, shuts his phone off, goes to bed, and then he wakes up, starts it all over again. And his whole point is, like, there's other guys that would rather relax and kind of chill and do their own thing. It's like, no, I'm going to work. I'm going to be better than you, and I'm going to make more money than you because I'm going to work harder than you. Again, his whole premise is in wealth, but his point is, he's going to be the hardest working guy, and that's why he's always going to come out on top.
Right.
I agree with Joe in the sense that I think having this mindset in your career and in your position, even maybe in your congregation, I want to work really hard. I don't want anybody to look at me and think that's a lazy guy.
Right.
If you have that mindset of I don't ever want to be accused of lazy, you're probably going down the right track. However, in the society that we live in, I think there are always going to be people that are working harder than you.
Yeah.
Because they don't have God, they don't have Christ,
Right.
they don't devote. You see the really successful guys, that are Wall Street or whatever, they lose their family because they're working so hard.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think the emphasis that we in this podcast have made or have placed on raising your family, treating your wife well, raising your kids, being a godly husband, godly dad, you're not gonna have time to outwork everybody. You're just not.
That's exactly it. This is the downfall of this one: is 18 hours a day. Where's your wife and kids?
Yeah.
Where's your family? Where's the
Even
legacy?
12 hours a day. Like,
right, exactly. Like, you can work that hard and, wow, I'm working harder than the guys at the office. To what end? Because there are people that, wow, I have way more wealth than you. Yeah, but I have a family and I'm happy. And we know that just because you have money there's lots of billionaires who have killed themselves. Just because you have money and just because you have status and wealth and everything else like he has in the Bugattis doesn't bring about happiness. And so the idea of outworking everyone, I wish people had more of this in them because, once again,
correct, yeah.
Don't measure yourself against the lowest common denominator. At the same time, yeah, you can take this so far where it's like, what's the point of work? Work has become your idol. It's become your god.
I want you to bring in Ecclesiastes here because we could bring it in at the end or really in any of these. But you brought this up before we started recording, and it's perfect in the sense that Andrew Tate really needs Ecclesiastes because his whole point, seemingly to his life, is work. He talks about how he doesn't really want to date anybody because he'd rather work. He doesn't really want to do anything else because he'd rather work. And it's like, yeah, that's I don't want to say that's better than being like we have way too many super lazy people, but that's still, you swing the pendulum too far, and that's still not right.
Yeah, because look at Ecclesiastes. You have Solomon, the richest man, the wisest man to ever live. He calls himself the smartest man on earth.
He does.
Okay, guy. Okay. What a G. Yeah, he's as he's got it. How does he do it? It's like this. I think with his hands. Yeah.
I have no idea.
In so many ways, he's a loser. Let me just say that. Like, he has some great points as we're discussing. And in so many ways, like, dude, you're a loser. But you look at Solomon. Solomon had it all.
Solomon was the original Andrew Tate.
That's exactly the original G. Yeah. Because he's got the women, he's got the wealth, he's got the vineyards, he's got all this, like, and he's got a ton of work.
Yeah, he's got everything you could ever want on this earth.
Everything you could ever want, and way more than Andrew Tate could ever dream of having. And what does he come to? All is vanity, man.
It's all pointless.
It's all pointless. Like, all is vanity. And it's such a dismal, downer book until you get to the end and he says, and a few times throughout he says, eat, drink, and be merry and enjoy the fruits of your labor. And the idea is celebrate when you've worked hard, right? That's okay. He doesn't seem to understand that. This is the outwork everyone. Sometimes it's good to just relax and to appreciate what you've gained. The eat, drink, and be merry, which Solomon says a few times. But the last, which I guess we should save toward the end, we're going to come back around to this, but is fear God and keeps commandments. And Andrew Tate needs to read it because this outwork everyone,
it doesn't get you to fearing God and keeping His commandments.
Exactly. It falls right into what Solomon tried to do. He tried to find meaning in working hard, and he realized that's vanity too, because it's all going to go away. I can accumulate ridiculous amounts of wealth. Where's it going to be when I die? Well, okay, maybe it goes to your kids, and they'll fritter it away down the generations, which they did. I mean, you look at Solomon, and the kingdom divides with his kids. Like, it's just horrible. Outwork everyone sounds really good. There are really good points to this. Overall, I think it's lacking.
It misses the mark. It misses the mark.
Get us to number 3.
Number 3, this is something that we've harped on in this podcast before. I think every young guy needs to understand this. He says, stop making excuses. This is number 3. Stop making excuses about why you're not X, Y, and Z. Why your grades aren't good. Why you don't have the job that you want. Like why you didn't get into college. Whatever it is. Stop making excuses. And I think so many guys these days run towards the excuses train rather than let me figure out why I didn't get that grade or get that job, and then let me go and figure out how to get it.
Yeah.
Again, we live in this kind of pandering society, and I think it's because feminism has kind of shouted men down to the point where we don't think we can achieve. And so it's like, well, if women want us to just kind of stay in the corner and kind of be this mousy, really kind of wimpy, weak guy, I guess that's what I'll be, because that's what's going to make them happy. And that's where guys like Andrew Tate come in and say, and that's why he's appealing to so many people, is because he's saying, no, quit being that person, quit making excuses, and go chase after what you want and go get what you want. You can understand why that's appealing for a lot of guys who have been shouted down for generations.
No kidding. I mean, that's a very appealing message to the world. When you remove God from it, and when you remove God from these people's lives, what do they have? So when he says stop making excuses and get out there and go get what you want. Yeah, I mean, while we're watching it, we're kind of almost pumped up, right?
Exactly.
There is this energy that comes about from that, because he is right. Far too many people make excuses. Far too many people and they don't ask themselves, and I've riffed on this before. I've talked about it, and it's a big soapbox of mine. No one asks themselves why.
Yeah.
Why is this not working out? Why didn't this work? Why is this going this specific way? Why didn't I get that promotion? Why? Instead, they just make excuses as to, well, they passed over because of X, Y, Z. Well, they just didn't like me here. Well, it's discrimination. Well, it's just... Instead of why, and really digging to the bottom of it and realizing I'm lacking.
Yeah.
I need to do something a little bit more. Stop making excuses. Honestly, look in the mirror and question yourself and ask why. It's a great point. Number 2.
So he talks about question everything, and he talks about how he doesn't believe in clinical depression. And I guess maybe this would be better if you talked more about this with you being a therapist. But he talks about how Tate does, how he doesn't believe in it because he doesn't believe in anything that can take power away from him. And I actually kind of like this analogy, and maybe you can find the holes in it here. But he talks about you get two people who are in a haunted house, and one of them believes in ghosts and the other one doesn't. The guy who believes in ghosts is going to be freaked out of his mind because he believes in ghosts, and the other guy's like, yeah, big deal, don't care. And so it's the figment of his imagination, the guy that believes in ghosts. If you don't believe in depression, is his point he's making, you're not going to be depressed. And so I thought that was interesting. I haven't thought enough about it to know whether or not I necessarily agree with it. But his point is, don't just believe everything everybody tells you. Just because clinical depression is a thing doesn't mean that you can be depressed. He doesn't believe in it, and so in his point of view, he'll never be depressed. I got to say, I don't know if I agree with it. I thought it was interesting. I don't know what your take was.
I believe he's spot on with question everything. That's what you and I do, is we sit around and question, why is it this way?
Yeah.
What about that? And we do question everything. As far as the clinical depression goes, maybe I'd get in trouble for this, saying this as a therapist. I happen to agree with him.
Really?
I think depression it's not necessarily a choice, quote unquote. I do think that there is depression that is caused by chemical imbalances that can be fixed. Most of the time, that's not the case. Most of the time, depression is caused from past issues or from present circumstances. If those are changed, and if you change the way that you view those, and you change your actions surrounding those, and you get surrounded by mentors and by people that care, it's like fixable.
Yeah.
And so if something is fixable, then is it clinical? Is it something that you're just stuck with for life? No. So it's such an empowering thing to say, I'm not going to let that have power over me. And so even if he does end up depressed, his mindset of, you know what, the best thing to do is get up, get to work, do your thing, go about your day, be an adult. What does he say? He says the best thing to do is to still get up, be an adult, control your emotions, be stoic, and do the things that you have to do day after day. Laying in bed and doing nothing is never going to be the best option.
Amen.
Amen.
Absolutely.
Spot on. As a therapist, I think depression's rooted in loneliness a lot of the time, but for guys, a lot of the times it can be rooted in aimlessness and be rooted in not feeling needed, not feeling necessary. Yeah. When we do hard things and when we feel necessary to those around us, that really helps fight against some of the depression. So when we're sitting in our room and go, man, nobody's going to miss me. I don't want to live a life where no one's going to miss me.
Yeah.
I want to do things and people always miss you. Let me just say that. Suicide's never the option. I mean, people will always miss you no matter what. But at the same time, I want to do things in my life where I feel very useful, and I feel like I'm helping, and I feel like I'm doing things that are
striving for greatness.
Striving for greatness, exactly. Like I'm moving the chains, as they say. And this starts with question everything. What can I better in my life? That's questioning.
Well, and it's interesting, real quick, and then we can move on to this last one. But I think a lot of young people in the church have been told not to question, I guess specifically the Bible and specifically God. And I don't think it's wrong to have questions, specifically because I think the Bible stands up to every question you can throw at it. And God stands up to every question you can throw at it. And so I do think young people can kind of get turned off from the whole, well, just believe it. It's what we've always done. Don't question it. Young people are naturally going to question things. And Andrew Tate's point, of course, he's not talking about the Bible. He's talking about the Matrix, as he calls it, right? Yeah. Question everything they're telling you. And the last few years have kind of told us, like, yeah, that's probably pretty close to true with COVID and things like that. But, like, listen, it's not wrong to ask questions. To bring it back, I guess, to the Bible and spiritual things, it's not necessarily wrong to ask questions as long as you're doing it for the right reason. If it's truly to figure out, I want to know why. I'm curious about this versus, well, I just kind of want to find an excuse to live however I want to. That's not great. But, yeah, question everything. I'd agree with that. Like,
I think you have to ask questions because you have so many people that they don't really have a faith of their own. And so they get 25, 30 years old. Yeah. Maybe they even have a family at that point. But because they didn't question things and they didn't ever really get the answers as to why, somebody comes along and starts questioning them and they go, man, my faith is founded on nothing.
I don't know. Yeah, exactly.
Well, why didn't you just question things at 15, 16, 17 and find the right answers?
Like find the answers, exactly.
The Bible will always hold up. So his idea of question everything, including things like depression. I mean,
let's be real here. The COVID vaccine, like things like that, where instead of just kind of blindly accepting everything that specifically the government tells you, and our video is probably going to get censored here, but it's like, instead of just blindly accepting everything, like, no, question it. Yeah. Not just for the sake of being a contrarian, but actually just because you're your own guy and you want to find the answers.
Yeah. It doesn't mean you always go against it. And that can kind of be, as you said, like the trope of, well, I'm the guy that goes against the narrative.
I zig when everybody else zags.
Exactly. Like, don't be that guy. But be the guy who questions things, and sometimes you'll go along with the narrative. If it's a government, most of the time I'm going against the narrative. But with the authorities in life, I mean, you want to question things and just say, hey, why is this the case? And you'll notice this as you get older with your parents. You're more likely to question them as a teenager. Go, why do they do this? And why do they do that? That's all part of the natural progression. Don't lose that asking why, because I think that's, again, a part of the progression of us turning into men is to question everything. And at some point, we turn that off. And specifically college, I'm not a big fan of college because college tells you just take it as it is. I'm the professor. I'm smarter than you. Question everything. The people that go far in life, the reason Andrew Tate went far is because he did question the status quo and said, what if we did this and this and this and this? And it worked for him. Like, it doesn't always work for everybody, but questioning always is good, I think, especially if you're willing to dig till you find the right answer. How do you know when you find the right answer? Usually, specifically when it's grounded in Scripture, it's the answer that is grounded in God, bringing you closer to God. But this brings us to our number one. Or
Andrew Tate's number one.
Andrew Tate's, yes. Our number one on the list, Andrew Tate's number one rule of life that this YouTuber put together. And that is honor your ancestors. And I think this is a pretty interesting one.
It was super interesting to me because I was watching the video, and you've heard these, like 2 through 10 are about yourself. Like, and that's one of the problems that we'll get into is it's very selfish and it's very like, self-centered. Except for so leading into number one, I was like, man, what's his number one going to be? Like, he's kind of been building a crescendo, and then number one, he gets to honor your ancestors, and it's like, that's kind of strange. But I 100% agree with everything he talked about here. His point is honor your ancestors through achievement. Like, the success that you have is going to honor, basically you owe your ancestors because of the sacrifices that they went through to keep your bloodline going. You owe them to do your best in everything. I think he actually said that, and it's like, that's exactly right. Yeah. And a lot of young guys don't have that mentality. It is very self-centered. It's very like they don't even know who their great-grandparents are type of thing. Yeah. Like, they don't think in the terms of there were 100 to 1,000 generations that were leading to me for me to do nothing? For me to just kind of be a loser? Like, that's such a bad mentality to have. And so, his number one is honor your ancestors through the things that you achieve.
I think this is Deuteronomy 6 in the Shema. Think generationally. Yeah. Think about the generations. There's 4 generations mentioned in Deuteronomy 6 of like their fathers, your fathers, you, and your children. And I think grandchildren, maybe 5. Lots of generations. And the idea of what you do today does matter. And it reverberates into the future with your kids, but also to the back of like, and one of the points he makes, his dad was a famous chess player, a very good chess player.
But I would have never heard of his dad if Andrew Tate didn't exist.
And that's his point, is the reason my dad gets talked about is because I achieved greatly. Like, you're honoring your ancestors, and they're being remembered based off of what you're doing today. And I do think there's some legitimacy to that. So it's the idea of getting outside of yourself. This is why having kids is so important, is you're passing down everything through the generations. And I was reading something, there's a meme I think that goes around like, be the greatest man in your bloodline, or be the greatest man your bloodline has ever seen.
Yeah.
What a fantastic
Why not strive for that?
Why not strive for that? Once again, strive for greatness. I think that's such a key thing of like, your bloodline does matter. The Wilkie name matters, and I want to pass that on. I'm glad that I've got boys. You got Haribs, right? And it's going to pass down. Like, that is so cool to think about. You're furthering your family's bloodline. That makes it worth it to me. And this was the one, why I thought this was fascinating. It gets number one. Like you said, everything else is me, pretty much, of I'm going to achieve and I'm going to make
a lot of money.
I'm going to do this and get the Bugatti and get the girl, whatever it may be. But when you come down to this one, it really comes down to like, what is all of this about? And it is about other people in your life ultimately. So I'm surprised that he did bring this in, because he's pretty arrogant and pretty individualistic.
Well, I think a lot of people would do well to listen to this one. Like, people don't think this way. Again, right. You got a lot of people, specifically, we've talked before in other podcasts about people don't want to have kids. It's like, so you've got generations before you that he makes the point, like, went through all these, issues, the plague, and worked really hard, and we're out in fields. Also, your bloodline could just end because you didn't want to have kids. Like, that's a pretty arrogant position for you to take, and yet that's what a lot of young people are taking these days. And so I did think that was an interesting one to end on. But we are at 35 minutes here, so let's talk about, as we kind of wrap this, the major flaw behind all 10 of these rules for Andrew Tate, and really his whole shtick, I guess you might say, because as you've heard, and again, for all those who are like, why are they even talking about Andrew Tate? Look, he's a big central character in masculinity. Guys are watching him anyway, so we might as well talk about, from a biblical perspective, what he gets right and what he gets wrong. And I think that's what we should do with everything, in the world today, everything on social media. As you've seen, he does get a lot right kind of on the surface about working really hard, about being okay with being uncomfortable, about finding a mentor, honor your ancestors, quit making excuses, ask questions. Like, those are good concepts. Like, there's nothing wrong with those, and I think we got the amount of young men who are not doing those things is way more than
very needed in today's culture.
It's very needed. But Joe, what's the problem? What's the overall flaw with Andrew Tate?
I mean, I don't know how you want to say it. It misses the point entirely of life. Like, there's no God. There's no God portion to this.
Yeah.
It is great. I grew this wealth, and I'm now
He's
respected.
doing it all for himself.
Exactly. I'm now respected. I've got honor. Wow, they shut down entire hotels when I come in with my entourage.
Great.
And then what?
Yeah.
And then what? Like, okay, now it's a matter of you keep wealth. Okay, and then what? And then, well, you grow old, and I guess you stop kickboxing, and you stop being able to do the lifting the same weights, and maybe you're making more money. Okay, and then what? I mean, and then what? It comes down to, he's missing the point of Ecclesiastes, because this is what Solomon did. I did that, and it didn't work. And then what? And I did something else, and then that was vanity too. And then what? And then what ends with fear God and keep his commandments. He's completely missing that point in all of this. Is there's something bigger and better than you out there. This is why God asks us to be leaders of our home, to extend our bloodline and our family, right? And to be strong men of the church, and to not just chase after wealth. Wealth can be taken away. Status can be taken away. The Bugattis and everything else, and the nice watches, all of that can be taken away, and ultimately you're storing up treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy. He is not thinking about it. And I know with Islam, he's starting to come around or whatever he thinks, but he's not really thinking about God and about where his position is in life, and the fact that you're so stinking insignificant. Yeah. Like, he thinks he's one of the best and smartest and brightest and richest men on earth. Nobody's going to care about you in 10 years, to be honest with you, because you're not leaving any legacy that is absolutely lasting in the eyes of God. And to me, that's what makes the difference here.
That's very well said. I think my only closing comments would be, as I was watching the video and watching him talk about how he works 18 hours a day and how he just works harder than everybody else, and he's always on his phone, he's always growing his business, and he's always walking in as the richest person in the room. It was motivating. It's like, man, that's great. But like you said, what about when he's 80? What about when he's 85? Yeah. What about when he's 90? He says he wants to conquer the earth. That's the only thing he wants to do. His life is going to be over in 60 years or maybe even less. And so it's like, at the end of the day, what does that achieve? And the answer is, it's personal success, personal achievement, and that is it. And so I guess our takeaway from this is that a lot of these principles, sure, implement them, but understand Colossians 3. Whatever you do in word or deed, don't do it for your own glory. Yeah. Don't do it just so you can walk in the room and look down on everybody else and wear your expensive watches just to show off. Do it to God's glory. Yeah. Do it because, and we're going to have an episode again here in a few weeks on wealth and things like that, but like, do it for the glory of God. Do it because you know that there's a life after this one. And that's something we've talked about before, about keeping the perspective that this life isn't all there is. Andrew Tate seems to operate under the premise of, I got to conquer as much as I can in this life. Yeah. And you got to figure, I know he's Muslim or whatever, but it's like, what does he have to look forward to in 60 years, in 50 years, after his conquering is over and after he's no longer, super fit and whatever? He completely misses it, even if a lot of these are kind of spot on. Yeah. He misses it, like you said, because it's for himself. It's not for any greater purpose.
So you may be listening, and you may have listened to a lot of his stuff, and you may embrace a lot of his stuff. You may think, we do too. We embrace a lot of these things as once again, on the surface, really good ideas. But please be careful when you're listening to this man.
Yep.
First off, he is not in any way somebody you want to emulate, morally speaking.
Right.
He's done a lot of dubious things, and he's very problematic in a lot of ways. But second off, he just misses the point, and you almost feel sad for him. It's like you're chasing after so much, just poof, gone.
Yep. Your life is a vapor.
Your life is a
James
vapor.
4, right?
That's exactly it. Moth and rust are going to destroy every last thing that you own. That Bugatti is not going to look great in 100 years, but I'll tell you what will, is you and I sitting in heaven talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
That's going to be amazing. So make sure that you're keeping it all in context. Make sure that, yes, take what it's worth, spit out the bones. There's a lot of bones in this to spit out. Overall, I think he's big for a reason. We need to be hearing a lot of these things, but never forget that God is greater. And that's what we're doing. We're working unto the Lord, and everything has to be to the glory of God.
And just remember, if you want good advice on being masculine, go to the Godly Young Men podcast. You don't need Andrew Tate. You've got us, right?
We're here, yeah. We're going to do our 10 rules of... No.
We'll be in our Bugattis that we don't own.
That's right. That's right. Well, actually, we may be working on a book about rules for men.
That's right. That's right. Stay tuned for that.
May or may not. We'll see.
Stay tuned for that. But no, this has been episode 30. What did I say? 32. We're on 32. So
wow.
we are just
35, isn't it? 35?
No, 32. I'm pretty sure.
Wow,
There's no way we're
32.
35. Yeah.
Oh.
So we just hit
Okay,
32.
jumping again.
We are cruising right along. Again, thank you for watching. Leave your comments. Leave your thoughts on some of these. Again, we don't subscribe to all of them, but a lot of them we think have value. But yeah, keep the perspective that Joe just talked about with, listen, strive for greatness for God's glory, not for your own. But yeah, we'll wrap right there. Again, leave any comments you might have, and we'll be back next week with another episode of the Godly Young Men podcast. Thanks for watching.